Nation. I'm Brad Pomerance in Riverside today, joined by a councilman from that great city. His name is Mike Soubirous. And Mike, I think it's fair to say that your community, your ward, is not downtrodden. It's a
No.
nice area.
Yes.
But you've received emails like this one, which are a bit troubling. A constituent writes that she's having a problem with a very aggressive group of homeless, that they are fighting at 3 a.m, that they are yelling, they are using drugs, they are leaving debris on the streets, they are worried about children in the neighborhood, throwing rocks. This email is long and at some level a bit desperate. You can
Yes.
feel
Oh, yes.
your constituents' pain. And again, this is not a downtrodden area.
No.
Talk to me about what you're seeing in terms of the homeless crisis.
You know, it seems to be growing. We've got about less than 350 in our city that we've documented that are there, and it's an increase, I bet, what, 23%
Yeah.
or something. I think I saw the numbers.
Let's talk about that because
Yeah.
recently the homeless count came out
Yes.
in the Southern California counties.
Right.
While Riverside City saw a spike of about 23%.
Yes.
The county saw a spike, I think it's 11.5%.
Yeah.
Interestingly, San Bernardino County saw a drop of 1%, but LA County up 23%.
Right. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that when you look at the overlay of where you would say is the more aggressive stance on enforcement and, you know, less tolerance of certain behaviors, that's where you're seeing the drops.
Oh, so you
San Bernardino
feel
County has really kicked it up, and they actually have a homeless plan that they've been working on where they've really kicked up the enforcement of not tolerating certain behaviors.
So, given what you hear from constituents like
Yeah.
this individual, I mean, she indicates in the letter that I guess police did arrive.
Yes.
But that was only after there was
Yeah,
actual
it seemed
violence.
like, just reading into her email, it seemed
Right.
like it took quite some time for her to do that. And that's why I want to talk to her and find out what the hesitancy was.
Right.
Did she call right away and they didn't show up? You know, and it took a while?
Right.
Because she says they got there real quick, but when did she call when it really escalated? So that's an issue to look into.
I spoke with Aquanetta Warren, who's the mayor of Fontana. You may
Yeah.
know Aquanetta. And I asked her about the positive statistics in her county. She also mentioned that she felt as if part of the reason they saw a drop was intense involvement from the faith-based community.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you think that is part
Huge.
of what Riverside
Yeah.
City and or county needs to do.
Yeah, it's really huge. In my opinion, from what I've seen, I've had a few pastors be kind of critical
Right.
that, you know, I was kind of maybe bashing a church, and that's not my intent. I want to get us all on the same page. I think that the faith-based communities have a lot to offer, but don't offer the wrong things that are going to create dependency. And I think what we've been doing is we've been doing things that have been creating dependencies where many of the homeless say, well, why should I bother getting off the street if I'm getting fed every day? And if you look at them, they don't seem to be malnourished whatsoever, quite the contrary.
But who's feeding them? Because that becomes the
Individuals and
challenge.
churches.
Yeah, okay, so as it relates to churches, that's more of a formalized program.
Yes.
And so I'm hesitant to criticize, it's hard to know. But when we talk about individuals, I mean, I have been told on countless occasions, if you want to help someone that's homeless, don't give them money.
Right.
Don't give them food.
Right.
Maybe give them a card to say there's a shelter down the street.
Right, right.
And so, look, we feel compassion.
Right, and everybody does, and I'm compassionate
Yeah.
to this problem. But on the flip side, I know that there's a dependency thing that gets created, and I don't want to add to the long-term effect.
Right.
I could make myself feel really happy by going and giving some food. I went through this park that's in Ward 3, Shamel Park, recently. There'd been a lot of problems, and part of why maybe some of these folks are at the doorstep over here at this person that wrote to me and I forwarded is they've been chased out of this park. And it's kind of like, as the police sometimes will say, whack-a-mole, and they don't mean any disrespect, but you know, it's like the little game that when you push them out of this area, they pop up over here, and when you push them out of here, they come over here. And on the bigger scale, we have that problem with other cities.
Right.
Because we need to be coordinated so that we're not all just pushing them into Harupa
Right,
Valley, who
right.
pushes them back to Riverside, not that they're intending to,
No, I
but just by
understand.
their enforcement. And they keep moving around, and we spend enormous amount of public funds on this, but we're really not solving a problem.
And when we talk about enforcement, Mayor Warren also talked about the kind of the approach that police took maybe 10 years ago and then are taking today.
Yeah.
Because there is a fine line between criminalizing mere homelessness
Right.
and then criminalizing the acts of people
Right.
who happen to be homeless.
Right.
And, you know, we did take a very one could say criminalized approach to homelessness that the courts have said we can't do anymore.
Right.
So there's kind of a push-pull here. I mean, you suggest that it's kind of enforcement that's helping San Bernardino County, but how much enforcement can you do if it's merely being homeless?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, from being in law enforcement for close to
Right,
30 years,
please.
I never saw a really big push on nailing people for being homeless. I didn't see it. Most of the cops I worked with didn't even want to touch these people, didn't want to be around these people. You know, they smell, there's a problem, I don't want them in the back of the patrol car. I mean, that's some of the things I'd hear. And I think a lot of them turned the other way and looked away. When I worked for the CHP, very few of my peers were out there wanting to write citations to these folks that were panhandling, which is not, most of them are not homeless, and that statistically can be proven. But people lump them in together because they see that as being one and the same. But it's interesting, there's really kind of a not really wanting to have to deal with these folks because, you know, people will yell at the officers, you know, pick on somebody else or pick on somebody that's, you know, not down and out. They'll get that, or they'll get the praise like, you know, do something about it. So I think what has been, you know, maybe labeled the idea that, you know, we're criminalizing homeless, I didn't really see a lot of enforcement years ago. I think some of the issues were is certain attorneys found that there were certain things that they could, you know, maybe make some money off of these folks and push some of these issues. You know, maybe there were some vagrancy laws that they said, well, wait a minute, you know, if they're sitting in a park and they're homeless and they're on a mat and they've got, you know, maybe a couple of their belongings next to them, what's the difference between that and the person that's sitting, you know, on a towel or a blanket with their children? There is no difference, and you can't discriminate, and that makes sense. You know, you can't look at, well, you're homeless, you can't be here. I get that whole idea, but I just didn't see this heavy-handedness. And I actually see where people almost tolerate, well, they're homeless and they're going to steal certain things and they're going to take these things so they can live off of them. This is to support drug habits, most of it, drug and alcohol.
Beyond tragic.
It is, and it's horrible.
And I've heard that from countless people.
Yeah.
That it really fundamentally, look, there are some that may have mental illness unconnected to
Absolutely.
addiction.
Right.
Some may be down and out.
Yeah.
But a lot of this is a drug and alcohol question.
Better than 85%.
And so where do we go from there? I mean, there are these halfway houses that we've talked about. I know recently there was an article about these halfway houses and the
Potential for abuse.
Potential for abuse.
Yeah.
You know, and then there are those that are service resistant.
Right.
That are not
Very much so.
interested.
And that's what our homeless outreach will say is that at minimum 60 contacts on average to before any of them will even say, well, tell me about this. Well, what would I have to do? And that's not even an acceptance of it. That's just, tell me about it, I'll listen. And that tells me that there's a problem where there is this high resistance level. And where is the high resistance level coming from? Is it because, as these people will tell me on the street, I'm being fed, I don't really have a desire to have need for certain things. It's given to me. I was in Shamel Park and I drove through there because people were complaining. And I saw this lady pull up and she kind of looked at me and she tried to kind of hide a little bit in her car. And I thought, oh, okay, she doesn't want me to see her, so I'll bet you she's here to feed one of these two guys that are out in the grass. So I kind of drove around the corner around the swimming pool area and kind of watched from a distance, and she got out, she looked around, and she went up and fed them. Now, that's a wonderful idea and a wonderful thing to do. And I don't want to criticize people's motives, but sadly, it's not productive to the overall big picture of what we're trying to do is eliminate this dependency thing where people are feeding them. A lot of business owners are doing this.
It's a never-ending problem that
No.
hopefully we will see an end at some point, because I know this region is very dedicated to trying to tackle the issue of homelessness. His name is Mike Soubirous. He is a councilman in the city of Riverside, where we are today. I'm Brad Pomerance. I'm so glad you're with us on Local Edition.